Michelle Hawthorne.
Mercedes Milbury Fowler.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kelly Hampton. I'm with Break the Cycle. We're going to be starting in a few minutes, but I just wanted to remind folks everyone should be muted on the line, but if for some reason your phone is not muted, please make sure to mute your phone. You can do this using *6 or on your own phone system. Thank you.
Robin Comparini. Janice.
Sharonda.
Tracy Rush.
Mike.
Lori Kennedy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon, folks. How are you? If you could, all lines should be muted, but if your phone is not muted, you can either press *6 or you can mute it on your own phone system. We'll be starting in probably a minute or two just to allow some additional folks to join the call. Thank you.
Kathy Lee.
Mahavir Jain.
Jackie Howshill.
Mr. Epps.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikki Godwin. I work in HCSC Public Affairs, and I just wanted to give a quick welcome to you all. We're so happy that you could join us, and we're really happy that Love is Respect could host this webinar for us today. So just a really brief overview of Love is Respect. They're one of our Healthy Kids, Healthy Families pillar partners, and we've been partnering with them for about 3 years now. We really wanted to do this webinar for you all just because the teen dating violence epidemic is really one that many people may not be aware of, and Love is Respect has some really great information and resources on what teen dating violence is, what it looks like, and really how you can get the conversation started with the teens in your life. So we have a very full agenda for the webinar today, and I definitely wanted to make sure that you all have time to ask questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Hampton from Break the Cycle, who will tell you a little bit more about the organization, and she'll also lead the webinar for us today.
Thank you, Nikki. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. As Nikki said, my name is Kelly Hampton, and I work with the Training and Technical Assistance team here at Break the Cycle in our Washington, D.C. office. I am very glad to be here with you all this afternoon to talk with you about the dynamics of teen dating abuse and how to talk to teens. We are also joined today by Christina Escobar, Aaron Clark, and Jasmine Sejas from Break the Cycle, as well as Nikki and Bridget Burke from Blue Cross Blue Shield and Healthcare Services Corporation. So welcome to everyone. Before we jump into the substance of our webinar today, I wanted to briefly go over some logistics for the webinar and then share a bit more about our work here at Break the Cycle and Love is Respect. If you are disconnected from the webinar at any time, please go back to the original email that you received from iLink and click on the Join link again to log back in. If you have any problems getting back on, please call iLink support at 1-800-799-4510. And my colleague Aaron Clark will type in that number into the chat. If you happen to be only on the audio portion of the webinar, you are also welcome to email Aaron at eclark@breakthecycle.org if you have any trouble or questions throughout the webinar. She will also type her email address into the chat box. So everyone will be muted today on the call, but please use the chat function to contribute questions or thoughts.
So Chitrico?
And you'll see when folks enter, that introduction is not muted, so please make sure your phones are muted. We will have time for questions, as Nikki said, at the end of the webinar, but if questions pop up for you during the webinar, please type those questions into the chat box. That you'll find that on the left-hand side of your screen, and we will answer those as we go along as well. We will be sending out both the PowerPoint slides and the link to the recording after the webinar, so don't worry if you miss something.
Valerie Hennessy.
Sorry, that'll happen just for probably a few more minutes, and then we should be good to go. So much of our work at Break the Cycle is done through our partnership with the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Working together to run loveisrespect.org, we serve as the largest resource in the country for young people experiencing abuse. Love is Respect is the ultimate source for support, for tools, and for services to help young people prevent and end dating abuse. So we reach young people through Love is Respect in 3 ways. First, on the ground, through prevention education curricula that are used across the country to build a youth-driven conversation and to develop the next generation of leaders. Also, online at the website that you see on your screen here, where over 1.5 million visitors a year come to learn about dating abuse. And finally, through our 24/7 phone, chat, and text support, where peer advocates help young people all day, every day, online, over the phone, and through the nation's first Text for Help service. And you can see on your screen there the live chat options on the right-hand side. This leads me to the work we are doing with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'd like to turn over the mic for just a second to Christina Escobar, a Deputy Director of Break the Cycle, to tell us a little bit more about that partnership. Christina?
Hello, everyone. So we are just so excited to be working away with Blue Cross Blue Shield and Healthcare Service Corporations. The program that we're doing together is called Start Talking. You can see that sort of blue heart hand thing is how we advertise it on Love is Respect. It's a really innovative, exciting program, and we're just thrilled to have had the opportunity to do it and to be continuing to operate it. So what it is a classroom curriculum, presentation, toolkit, sort of everything your school or community organization might need to address this issue of what is dating violence, what is dating abuse, and how can young people have healthy relationships. So we encourage local folks in Illinois, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas to learn about the issue and be able to teach young people about drawing their own lines, creating their boundaries, and really setting them up for a lifetime of healthy relationships. So we do that through public awareness, through training, through in-school presentations, and it's just been an amazing partnership, and we're so excited to be partnering with you all to get this good word out in the community.
Thank you, Christina. So this brings me to our goals for today's webinar. By the end of this webinar, it is my hope that you will better be able to define and understand some key dynamics of dating abuse. We're also going to look at the key influencers of dating abuse and discuss what kinds of factors can impact youth dating relationships. We will identify some warning signs of dating abuse for both the victim and the partner perpetrating abusive behaviors in a relationship. And I will leave you all with some strategies that you can use to prepare yourself to talk to the young people in your lives about healthy relationships. I want to start, though, first by taking a minute for a thought activity. Normally when we do this in-person trainings, I ask folks to close their eyes to do this, but I'm not going to have you all do that today, especially since I can't see any of you. But if you could, just take a second to picture yourself when you were 15 years old. What kinds of clothes did you wear? How did you wear your hair? Who was your best friend? Did you have a crush? What did you think you would be like when you grew up? What did you think of the adults who were in your life? How did you feel about your increasing independence? Okay. Thank you all for going there with me. If you feel comfortable, please feel free to type in the chat something about your 15-year-old self if you'd like to share. Anything you would like to share is great. Everyone has a different experience growing up, so there are some experiences that many young people share. I'd like you to keep that 15-year-old version of yourself in mind today as we talk. When we discuss dating abuse, we are referring to abusive behaviors used to exert power and control over a dating partner. This definition is an evolving one, but it is adapted from the language of the Violence Against Women Act. This definition may sound familiar to those of you who have had some experience with or training in domestic violence. And that's because in many ways, teen dating abuse and domestic violence are similar. You may hear other terms used besides dating abuse used to describe what we are talking about today, and these can include adolescent relationship abuse, dating violence, and teen dating violence. These terms are all appropriate depending on when and where they are used, but we use the term dating abuse because we work with youth and young adults, not just teens, and dating abuse versus dating violence, which can be limiting just to violent acts or to a specific crime as defined by the law, whereas dating abuse describes a broader set of actions. So definitions are important, but let's take a closer look at what we really mean when we say dating abuse. First, notice that dating abuse is a pattern of behavior. This does not mean that the first instance of abuse is not dating abuse, or that all abusive relationships follow the same pattern, but we do know that dating abuse usually involves a series of abusive behaviors that happen over the course of time. And once abuse happens for the first time, it is likely to happen again. The pattern that many of you may be familiar with is a cycle. So we've heard the term the cycle of abuse. This can be a helpful way of thinking about how abuse plays out in a relationship, but be careful not to get stuck in one way of thinking. So some folks describe their abusive relationships as a cycle, whereas others describe it as experiencing abuse in a wave or on a spectrum. And still others don't feel that their relationship fits into any of these models. So while a relationship may not fit into an established model, it may still be unhealthy and abusive. And this is a tricky piece of the definition for young people to understand. Often we don't talk too much about the cycle, but we talk about how the relationship exists on a spectrum. So the spectrum you see there at the bottom of your screen includes healthy, unhealthy, and abusive behaviors. The idea of a relationship spectrum is helpful in teaching about what types of behaviors fall into these categories. On the next slide, I will show you what we created on our website, our loveisrespect.org website, to assist young people in figuring that out for themselves. So on the right-hand side of your screen is the relationship spectrum. It is available on our website, as I was saying, and it is an interactive tool to help teens figure out what is healthy, unhealthy, or abusive in their relationship. Here are a few examples of abusive behaviors that have been reported to us by teens that we've worked with at Break the Cycle and Love is Respect, and just what we know doing this work generally. It can be very difficult for a young person to identify what is abusive. What is the most important thing to understand is that there are lots of different types of abuse beyond just physical abuse, and that's the one that we always think of first. Emotional and verbal abuse can be much harder to identify, but may and most likely is even more present. So here you see on our screen a couple of different types of abusive behaviors. Are there others besides these that you all have seen, heard of, that you could share with us in the chat? So forcing sexual activity, hitting, pushing, scratching, refusing to practice safe sex. And on the right you see some more tech-related abusive behaviors, so texting to monitor someone, threatening to post a provocative picture to a social media site, stealing an email password. Teens are especially vulnerable to these types of abuse via technology, and we'll talk about that a little later today. All right. Next part of the definition, used to exert power and control. You may recognize the power and control wheel that is shown here from the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project from Duluth, Minnesota. The power and control wheel is a visual that you can use as a tool when teaching young people about abuse and violence. It illustrates that abusive behaviors are merely the tactics that an abusive partner uses to exert power and control over a dating partner. Due to trauma that some young people have experienced and other things, they may have a difficult time, as I said, identifying abusive behaviors and linking that to seeing them as an attempt to gain power and control. It is really all of our jobs to help young people see and understand what power and control is and can mean in a dating relationship. And again, this is actually a teen-specific version of the power and control wheel that is available also on our website at loveisrespect.org. And it was developed as part of our National Youth Advisory Board, which is a project of Love is Respect, who provided input on the wheel so that to make sure that it was relevant to young people. All right, so here's another question for you all. What is dating, and what is a dating partner? What does dating really mean? I'm going to ask you all again to type into the chat common words or phrases that you may have heard young people use to describe dating. So I have a couple already up on the screen. So dating means talking to, hooking up, my boo, that one's a sweet one, hanging out. And in the chat I've seen some of you have contributed going out or a couple. What are some other terms? One of my favorites that I heard when we were doing this in training was Instagram or Facebook official to describe a dating relationship. I really love that one. Yes, someone else suggested seeing someone. So the point of this is that dating looks different at different times in your life, right? So when that 15-year-old self that we talked about at the beginning, dating meant something different to that 15-year-old than it does to you now. Dating might be something that's casual. It might be something that's serious. It could be short-term, long-term, sexual, non-sexual, monogamous, or not. The bottom line is you can't make assumptions about what dating means for any individual because it means different things. It is really important to learn how teens or youth define dating, relationship, or partner, and to use that definition while interacting with them. And I don't mean necessarily to mirror the terms that they use because sometimes they can be a little out there. Another one I heard one time, which was very funny, was Betty Crocker. They called dating was baking a cake or Betty Crocker, and I said, oh my goodness. But it can be difficult to know unless you ask what a young person really means when they say that they're dating. Yes, some more that I see in the chat. Friends with benefits or in a relationship. Yes, thank you. All of these are great. I won't spend too much time on statistics, but I do think it's important to give you all a national picture of what we are talking about and what is going on with regards to dating abuse. So you see that first statistic there. 1 in 3 teens experience some kind of abuse in their romantic relationships, and this includes verbal and emotional abuse. 1 in 3. That is a huge number. That is an epidemic. The second statistic, almost 10% of middle and high school students have been physically hurt, so hit, slapped, physically hurt on purpose by their boyfriend or girlfriend. It is important to remember that this number might actually be higher for sexual and emotional abuse. One, because it's more difficult to recognize emotional and sexual abuse, but sexual abuse is something that is really difficult to report as well. So this is just for physical abuse, but the numbers might be much higher for the other types of abuse. And the final statistic, young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest per capita rates of dating abuse. This is very important, but I also want to make sure to say that it is not just young women, but also young men who are experiencing dating abuse. And often we don't hear a lot about young men experiencing abuse. There's a lot of social stigma to reporting and other reasons why they may not come forward. But it still affects young women in this age range at the highest rates. When it comes to dating and relationships, young people engage with relationships and help-seeking very differently than many adults, but there are many similarities in adult and youth experiences of abuse. Youth experience very similar patterns of abuse as adults do. They experience similar types of abuse, just sometimes by different methods. They experience similar intensity of their relationships, right? The relationships are real and there is love there. They also experience similar difficulty in leaving a relationship, and this is important. I think a lot of folks that we work with, oh, I'm sorry. Someone is not muted. If you could just mute your phones using *6 or the mute on your phone system. Thank you. They experience similar difficulty leaving a relationship because they are part of maybe the same community as abusive partners. So for instance, if you're in school together or if you do extracurricular activities together. Dating abuse among young people is a very complex issue, and it has several key influencers. And I want to talk about those for just a minute. We often get the question, okay, what makes a young person more or less susceptible to experiencing or perpetrating dating abuse? And that's a really complicated question with a complicated set of answers. So what you see on your screen is the socio-ecological model, which has been used widely in the public health field as a way to understand the social and environmental factors that influence an individual's choices and behaviors. It can help us think about how dating behaviors among young people can be influenced by society, by their communities, through interpersonal relationships, and their own individual development. This model identifies certain factors and individual experiences that may put him or her at higher risk of becoming involved with dating abuse. More specifically, several factors like peers, peer groups, schools, what's going on in the neighborhood, social norms, and laws all have an impact on a young person's risk of becoming involved with dating abuse as either a perpetrator or as a victim. Many times people blame an individual for their involvement in an abusive relationship, and we cannot do that. It is important to consider that all environmental factors, including the role of parents and guardians and community norms, influence an individual's actions. Let's take a closer look at some of the most important factors that influence youth dating behavior. I'm going to start at the top with the importance of peer groups. Peer groups are very, very important and influential in a young person's life, and I think all of us are very aware of how powerful the peer group can be. When a young person's peers start experiencing new relationships or they start dating, young people will feel pressure to start dating themselves. They also feel pressured to have certain types of relationships and to have sex before they are ready, for example. Furthermore, places like school, because they are such closed communities, they make it very difficult to break away from a peer group or to do, have a young person do their own thing. You are always around the same people. That's a big one. Moving over to lack of resources. Young people don't have access to many of the resources that adults do. This seems fairly obvious, but just sort of to think through this for a second, this can include things like access to financial means, access to transportation, and also access to help services. So for instance, shelter services are often unavailable to young people under the age of 18, for example. And different health care services are not available for young people without, for example, parental consent or a parent's involvement. This can make it very difficult for a young person to find assistance or to leave a relationship in which they might be financially dependent upon a partner, for example. And often young people don't know their legal rights as well, or they're confused about those. So lack of resources is a big one. The third on our list, moving down to ongoing brain development. And this one is fascinating for me. The brain goes through these dramatic changes during the adolescent years. Adolescence is a time when reasoning and logic skills are developing, and young people are starting to question, established ideas and authority and to think in abstract terms. They start to develop self-control and eventually begin to process emotions more maturely. Younger adolescents may take more risks than older youth because that part of the brain that is controlling impulses and engaging in long-term perspective matures later on in life. So this can definitely impact the way that they engage in dating relationships. Down at the bottom, developing identity. Go back to that 15-year-old self and how you thought about who you were at that time in your life. Adolescence is really defined by that sense of a developing autonomy. With this, adolescents develop a sense of self. It just kind of includes things like figuring out what your talents are, your goals, your values, what you think about religion and politics and culture and all of these things. This is also a time when self-esteem is developing, which is tied intimately with establishing social status, among your peers, with regards to the adults in your life, and your parents. Varied life experience. So some young people have experienced more in their lives than many adults have. Some also have very limited life experience and limited experience in dating. Their life experience is comprised of, things that they've learned or seen. So they model what they see in their family, with their friend groups, and in the media. And this really has an impact on how they perceive dating and what it means to have a healthy relationship. And finally, the last bubble there, the prevalence of media and technology. We know that technology plays a major role in the relationships of young people, so let's take a closer look at that. Here are some examples of how teens have been shown to use technology in relationships. And again, these behaviors, we're going to kind of put that on that spectrum again, the relationship spectrum. These behaviors fall on a spectrum. There can be healthy interactions, such as using technology to start a relationship or to communicate in healthy ways, right? There can also be unhealthy and abusive interactions via technology. So these things, there are some examples on the screen, and feel free to add into the chat some additional examples that you might have seen or things that you've heard about. But this is things like monitoring a partner to control their activities, exhibiting emotional or verbal aggression, via texting or email. The abuse that teens experience through technology, you may not see it. It may not reflect itself in person. But on the other hand, sometimes the abuse that teens experience through technology might be a starting point for abuse to escalate in person. I just want to make the point that technology itself is not bad, right? Technology can be great. We just, as parents, as caregivers, guardians, folks who work with and support young people, we just have to be aware of what's going on and make sure that we know where these abusive behaviors can show themselves so that we can help our young people to avoid them. All right, I want to take a quick poll. This is just sort of an informal poll. The question is, how many young people have been called names, harassed, or put down by their partner over cell phones or via text? 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 10, or 1 in 20. I'm going to give you all just a minute to type in your answers into the chat. Oh, I love it. All right, folks, are chiming in. 1 in 3 is in the lead. Let's see here. All right. I'll give you all just a minute, and then I will reveal the answer. All right. 1 in every 4 say they have been called names, harassed, or put down by their partner through cell phones and texting. Now, I see overwhelmingly you all said 1 in 3, and I would also venture to say that this, again, statistics are what they are, but likely it is higher than 1 in 4. And these statistics, there's actually been an updated version of this study, but was done through Liz Claiborne and their Teen Research Unlimited. And I think there's one from 2009 and 2011 as well. But 1 in every 4 say they've been called names, harassed, or put down by their partner through cell phones and texting. And we hear a lot of discussion about like technology, abuse via technology or tech abuse. And it's not a new form of abuse, right? It's just a different medium. We know that technology gives young people unprecedented access to their dating partners, so whether it's in a healthy or an abusive relationship, and they allow much of the communication to take place beyond the visibility of parents and other adults. I'm going to read these other 3 statistics for just a second. So 1 in every 3 say they've been texted 10, 20, or 30 times an hour by a partner finding out where they are, what they're doing, or who they're with. I want to bring some attention to this because I don't know if you all text each other 30 times an hour, but that seems like a high number of texts back and forth. But the young people who we work with, they don't balk at that number. They think, oh, it's actually probably higher. I've texted more than 30 times with somebody back and forth in an hour. So the number of texts themselves are not the troubling thing. The troubling thing is the type of texts that are going back and forth. So the where they are, the what they're doing, and the who they're with. These like monitoring type of texts. So that's what you have to look out for. Moving over to the right, 1 in every 5. Young people have been asked over cell phone or the internet to engage in sexual activity when they did not want to. And nearly 1 in 5 say that their partner has used a cell phone or the internet to spread rumors about them. So this just presents sort of a picture of how dating abuse can play out via technology. There are a large number of negative impacts that dating abuse can have on a young person. These impacts will present themselves as warning signs that all of us should be aware of so that we can help support the young people in our life who may be experiencing dating abuse. Let's talk about it for a second. So dating abuse can affect many aspects of the life of a young person, including their health, their safety, and their academic success. Young people who are experiencing dating abuse have shown increased rates of suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts, of fighting, drug, alcohol, and tobacco use, risky sexual behaviors, and those can lead to unplanned pregnancies, STIs, or HIV. If the survivor or the young person who is perpetrating and the young person who is perpetrating the abuse attend the same school, for example, survivors may have trouble concentrating on schoolwork. They may also have conflict with the teacher, get into fights with other students, not show up to classes, or even drop out. And we see this a lot with the young people that we serve. You know, they don't want to go to school just to have to sit in the class with their abusive partner. I mean, it makes sense, right? They may be isolated from friends or show a lack of interest in former, activities that they formerly liked. They might be constantly checking a cell phone or showing signs of distress when they're asked to turn a cell phone off. These young people are also at risk of suffering physical injuries, and around 75% of girls and half of boys who experience dating abuse report an injury as a result of the violence in their relationship. It is also important, though, to keep an eye out for the red flags that may indicate if a young person is perpetrating the abuse in a relationship, right? So it's not just the victim or the survivor that we need to be keeping our eyes open for, but also the young person who might be using abusive behaviors. A lot of these are similar, and you may notice that from the abusive partner to the survivor, but here are some of the examples that you could look out for. So suddenly failing grades or other academic trouble, especially when there had not previously been a problem, attendance or disciplinary problems, acting withdrawn, acting quieter than usual, or on the other hand, acting more angry or more irritable than usual. Another one we hear a lot is when an abusive partner threatens suicide or self-harm if a partner wants to leave the relationship. And that's a big one. And also minimizing violent behavior. So if you've noticed that something's going on and you address it with a young person, then they minimize that violent behavior, that is a big problem. A young person may not feel empowered to report relationship abuse due to a lot of different obstacles, and we've just highlighted a few here. So I want you all please read through these and add in the chat any additional ones that you think are important or you think are not reflected on here. But it's very important to be sensitive to the obstacles that a young person faces in both recognizing that abuse might be going on in their relationship and then also seeking help for the abusive relationship. Young people, that 15-year-old self, they might be new to relationships, have difficulty sorting through all of those messages that they receive every day from friends, family, and the media about what a relationship should look like and how men and women should behave in relationships. So a couple that I want to highlight here. An obstacle to seeking help, the desire to keep the relationship a secret. Many young people are, I was not allowed to date, right? So if I did it secretly, and I would never want to tell my mom or my dad that I was dating someone. So that desire to keep the relationship secret can often be a barrier to reporting or seeking help. The desire to protect the abuser, that's another big one. A lot of people want the abuse. They come to us and they say, we want the abuse to stop, but I don't want anything bad to happen to my partner. There's also fear of not being believed, and this is a big one. We hope that the young people in our life trust us enough to come to us and ask us for help. But oftentimes young people say, you know what, I just didn't want to say anything because I figured no one would believe me. We want to make sure that that is not an obstacle to them reporting. Anything else that you all can think of or would like to add, please feel free to type it in. Yes, Shannon, thank you. Young people might think that most or all relationships are just like that, right? That there are unhealthy behaviors that are going on that are normal. It's just a normalized set of actions. Yes, that's a very important one. Thank you. So let's talk about, now that we know more about the dynamics of dating abuse, we've talked a little bit about the warning signs and the obstacles to reporting, let's talk about what you all can do. As parents, it is very common to want to take charge of potentially harmful situations and, make what we believe are the best decisions for our children. However, we can ensure that the young people within our life feel both protected and empowered to make informed decisions about their relationships while at the same time, so helping them and doing it in an empowering way. It is okay to not have all of the answers. We're going to talk a little bit about the knowing what to say and sharing resources in just a minute, but I want to just say that it's all right to not know everything when we're talking to our young people, but just having the conversation is important. So let's talk about that, having the conversation. So the first bullet there, assess your own relationship values before you talk to your kids. When we're talking about dating, it's a personal thing, right? We often speak from our own experiences. So, I would urge you all, and we have to do this here at our offices as well, to take a moment to reflect on our own relationship values. How do we expect our partners to act in our relationships? How should people behave when they disagree? How do you share decision-making in a relationship? So, thinking through those things and having good answers for yourself about them can really help you when you're talking to the young people in your life, whether they're your kids or other young people. Provide another perspective. So many young people are first exposed to social norms of dating by their peers, so like in the locker room, at slumber parties, whatever, on social media. It is vital to take time to understand where your child's opinion about dating comes from and to give them clear examples of what is a healthy behavior in a dating relationship, because they may not have heard it before. My apologies. I don't know if you can hear the siren, but we're right on K Street by the White House, so you may hear that in the background. My apologies. Tell the truth, good and bad. It is very common for young people to romanticize dating relationships, right? That 15-year-old self, the crushes that we had and all of that. Support these expectations, but also share with young people that all relationships have ups and downs. Stress that regardless of the situation, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse is never acceptable. These types of conversations are also a good time to think about boundaries in relationships. It could be dating relationships, but any relationships. And teach a young person to assert their boundaries and respect those boundaries that their partners set. On to teach assertiveness, not aggressiveness. One of the best skills I think that we talk about here is to make sure that young people can state their opinions, desires, and reactions clearly. For example, if they want to do something within their relationship, they should feel safe to say so. However, they should not take their partner's lack of a no as a yes, right? So, make sure that young people know that if they're ever unsure of what their partner's boundaries are, they should ask. Help recognize warning signs, and this is very important now that you all know some of the warning signs, but teaching a young person to recognize that thoughts of aggression are signals of frustration that need to be acknowledged and dealt with, and understanding the different warning signs of abuse in a relationship can be crucial when they're faced with those decisions or choices in their own relationships or with their friends. Sharing and being a role model. Young people may wish to keep some parts of their relationship private from adults, and that's okay, right? But helping them understand that secrecy can isolate them from friends and family entirely, and can also be a sign of manipulation and coercion in a relationship, and the difference there between wanting to keep something private versus becoming isolated or secretive. And finally, young people learn by observing, right? We look at the role models in our life, or we look at the adults in our life and they become role models in certain cases. It is critical that we model healthy relationships in our own relationships so that young people see that and model that. So I hear a lot from the audiences that we work with here at Break the Cycle. It's like, okay, well, there's never a good time to talk. I feel like every time I try, it's goofy or awkward or whatever. So here are some of the things that we've come up with as ways to, things to think about when you want to have these types of conversations with the young people in your life. So the first most important thing, create an open environment. Give the young people in your life plenty of opportunities to talk to you about relationships. I think very critical is avoiding judgment or criticizing a young person for having questions or having a different opinion than you might want them to have about a relationship. Being available to listen is something that young people always tell us is just crucial for them. And always remember that big ideas often begin as little thoughts slipped into the middle of a conversation about something else, right? For some young people, it can be really, really difficult to open up to a parent. So, think about what might make you comfortable if you were in their shoes. I think the second most important thing that we think here when we talk to young people about these conversations is just starting the conversation, right? And again, it might be awkward, it might be a little funny, but just starting it really, really helps. If your child is more comfortable talking with someone other than you, so an aunt, uncle, family friend, teacher, that's fine, and that's okay. Encourage them to do so, and keep in mind that the most important thing is that they have someone to go to who is an adult. Make sure the timing and location of the conversation is appropriate. While we all want to keep the lines of communication with our children open and to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, sometimes things like the perception that others could hear you or your discussion can prevent a young person from opening up and talking to you. So think of the times when you and your child or the young person in your life are alone. For instance, talking over lunch on a weekend or starting a conversation on the way to the store or when you're in the car. These are good times to have these conversations so that everybody feels private and it's in a relaxed setting, and that matters. It also matters that you give your undivided attention when you have the conversation. I want to move to the check-in often and understand the question and answer honestly. That last one particularly. If you're not sure what the child or young person in your life might be asking you, it's okay to say, help me understand, right? It's okay to ask them, what are we talking about here? When we were talking earlier about the word dating, there are a lot of other terms that young people use that we may not know what they mean, or we might think we know what they mean, but then we're not really sure. The young people we work with rank very highly the fact that an adult would say, I don't actually know what you're saying, please help me understand, as something that helps them build trust with that adult. Let them guide the conversation to the questions and ideas that they would like to discuss, and answer them honestly when they ask you a question. All right. Here are some conversation starters that we've sort of developed. These are just some suggestions of ways that you can actually open the conversation with the young person. So for instance, not even really talking about dating, right? What values do you think are important in friendships? What's a healthy way to argue? What's an unhealthy way to argue? What does it mean to stand up for yourself? And when you do stand up for yourself, do you think you're being strong? Do you think you're being pushy? Why or why not? Why do you feel that way? Another good one is choose a couple that you think has a healthy relationship, and why did you pick this couple? So maybe a celebrity couple or someone in their in their lives. Do you all, and this is a question for the audience out there, do you all have other ideas of conversation starters or things that you have used maybe that have been successful? Feel free to type those into the chat. So I want to shift for just a minute. We were just talking there about having conversations about healthy relationships and boundaries and dating abuse. But then, when you start these conversations, you also need to be prepared for a young person disclosing abusive behavior to you. So I just want to leave you with a couple of tips and things to think about if that does happen at any point. If a young person discloses to you that they are experiencing abuse, I think the most important thing is to believe them. Tell them you are glad that they came to you and that you are taking their situation seriously. Tell them that they deserve to be treated with respect by their dating partner and that the abuse is not their fault. Many young people don't ask for help because they fear, as we said earlier, that they won't be believed. They might be blamed, they might get dismissed or belittled. And unfortunately, that fear does come true more often than we'd like. So it's important to be aware of that. Also, it's very important not to minimize the abuse, but also not to minimize the importance of the relationship. I think that's a big one for young people. It's like, we think these are, they come to us and they say, my relationship is important. I'm sharing something with you and I want your assistance, so please don't tell me that the relationship isn't that big of a deal. That will just shut me down. The other thing that we think is very important here at Break the Cycle too is to ask the young person how they want to handle the situation. What is it that they need? You know, you may think you know what they need, but they're really the only ones that can share that with you in that moment. The other thing I would suggest, so that last bullet, provide information on local youth-friendly resources. You know, please visit our website, both loveisrespect.org, but also breakthecycle.org, and you can find out more about your state laws and other resources in your area that may be able to, you know, provide youth-friendly resources. You can also email us too, and we can help locate some services in your area. So we've said before, many teens don't ask adults for help because they fear of not being believed. And one of the tips that we give to anyone we are talking to about this issue is to think about the actual words that you will say to a young person if they come to you for help. Because, you know, in that moment, someone might say something, you know, that's a very disturbing thing to you, and you just don't know how you're going to react in that moment. So here are some phrases that we've put together, and we suggest that you prepare yourself with these and practice them, practice saying them. I know that sounds silly, but again, if you've got these practiced and sort of in your back pocket, you can say them no matter how you're feeling in that moment when a young person tells you about abuse they might be experiencing. So these phrases are things like, you deserve to be treated with respect. I believe you. I'm glad you told me about this. I want you to be safe. And that last one, I'm here if you ever need help or want to talk. Sometimes a young person will tell you what's going on, but they may not be ready at that moment to actually get help or get out of that relationship. You know, being able to just show that you're open and available to them as a support system or a support is key and vital. I'm going to just take a moment. I know I had asked for folks to submit some other ideas about how to start the conversation or where to start conversations with young people. And some folks suggested using songs or music videos as a way to open the conversation, and that is a great way to start the conversation. And Jasmine has shared, I just wanted to highlight this, Jasmine has shared a link to an activity which examines songs or music videos. It was developed by the Boston, the Start Strong Initiative, which the Boston chapter of that, and the Boston Public Health Commission. And there is a link in the chat to that activity. So take a look at that when you get a moment. So we talked at the beginning about our partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Start Talking project. And so here's the Start Talking website, and you know, another way that you can help in this, besides having those conversations with young people, is to go to our Start Talking website and download and get a free toolkit for your school or the school that your child is in or young people in your life are in. It is free, and I will highlight that as well, and it is a wonderful resource and a great way to educate young people on the issue. It is a technology, sort of social, it's a media and technology-based toolkit too, so it really links into what you all have been talking about in the chat over there about songs and music and using pop culture as a way to talk about this issue. I also just wanted to flag this for a second. So we're hosting this webinar today, and it's February, and it is Teen Dating Violence Prevention and Awareness Month. If you're not familiar with National Teen, we call it National Teen DVAM. It is a national effort to raise awareness about abuse in youth relationships and to promote programs that prevent it. So throughout this whole month, organizations and individuals throughout the country have come together to highlight the need to educate young people about this issue and to teach healthy relationship skills. So the website is on your screen. It's www.teendvmonth.org. And there are, if you go to this website, you can see all of the great events that have been going on this whole month. We've got, I think, a couple more days left of the month. And you can see what events have been going on in your community in case you're curious about that. There's also a peer educator toolkit, a youth toolkit for awareness raising events and putting those on in your communities and a lot of other things. So check that out when you have a chance. And finally, some resources. We've talked a lot about Love is Respect today on the call. Right there, that's the National Dating Abuse Helpline. So that's the text and the phone number for the helpline. And then our website at Break the Cycle, so www.breakthecycle.org. So I'm going to stop there. We've got a few minutes left, and I don't know if anyone has questions, or I haven't seen any in the chat, but please take a second to type in your questions, and I am happy to answer them. We also have Christina on the line as well, who can answer your questions that you might have about Start Talking or about our partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield HCSC. All right, so we have one question from Tiffany. What category does being used or taken advantage of fit into abuse? And that's a good question, Tiffany. I think manipulation and coercion are, that's an abusive behavior, absolutely, and it doesn't necessarily fall, I think, evenly into either sort of the emotional. I think it's emotional abuse, but in general, it is an abusive behavior. One of the relationship spectrum that I talked about at the beginning, and here I'm going to see if I can go back to that slide. Hold on. Here, just bear with me here while I go back. Give me 1 second. Oh, okay. So that relationship spectrum, so the healthy, unhealthy, abusive. That's the tool that's on our loveisrespect.org website. So it's an interactive tool where you basically go and it'll pose questions to you. So for instance, it would say something like, okay, is being taken advantage of or being used an abusive behavior? And you would say, yes, no, maybe. And then it allows you to sort of rank that behavior on that spectrum. So for instance, a question could be, does getting flowers constitute a healthy behavior in a relationship? And it's like, I don't know. Yes, I think so. And so you would say yes, and then an answer would pop up, and it would say, we agree with you. Yes, that is a healthy behavior in a relationship. It's a really, really great tool to dive into those questions about, things about like what category does a certain type of behavior fall into. So thank you, Tiffany, for that question. Oh, and Jasmine just put up on the chat where you can get the link to the relationship spectrum on loveisrespect.org. Any other questions? We're coming to the end of our time. All right. Well, if no one, okay, so thank you for this question. My son was in an abusive relationship, and it turns out that the partner had a brain tumor. Do you address illness, substance abuse, mental illness, substance abuse specifically in our program? So that is a really, really great question. Our program does not address those issues specifically or in any depth. It's more about sort of the healthy relationship and the behaviors that young people may be exhibiting or using in the relationship. However, there are lots of resources out there about the intersection of mental health, substance abuse, and trauma as well. That's a big one. So SAMHSA and the National Center for Trauma-Informed Care have been doing a lot of work about that. And I would also highlight VAWnet is what it's called, VAW.net. And it's a violence against women, sort of a collection of resources, and there's lots of information there about that link. So that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. And I'm going to type into the chat VAWnet. Website. We have one more question. Oh. This was something from back when we were talking about healthy conversations. So this is a suggestion that she asks them to let her know when things get over their head and when they need me to step in. So this is in regards to starting a conversation and helping out. That's a great suggestion. Thank you for sharing that. All right, folks. Well, we have come to the end of our time. Nikki or Christina, I don't know if either of you had any last words for the group. Like I said, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint slides, so you're welcome to use these, to share them with your peers or folks who couldn't make it today to the call. Thank you all so very much for participating and for contributing, and we hope to see you on loveisrespect.org soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, Christina, Erin, and Jasmine for your time. This was such great information, and I hope that everyone on the call, got as much from this as I did. So, thanks everyone for attending. If you have any follow-up questions, you can contact Love is Respect or the corporate community involvement team here at HCSC. Thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki.
And this is Christina. Just one last word. I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, one more time for participating, and also to just say that if you're interested in getting your school involved in bringing our programs, we have, as Kelly mentioned, those free resources at loveisrespect.org/starttalking, and we look forward to working with you all again soon. Thank you, and have a great day.